Squatters, invaders, destroyers. Some very, very bad-mannered animals are capable of terrible acts of vandalism in order to survive, often to the detriment of nature and other animals. Beware, you may find some of the following scenes shocking. Unable to build a home of their own, some creatures prefer to squat in the homes of other species. Worst of them all is the cuckoo. A dreadful mother, the female cuckoo lays her eggs in other birds' nests. Once hatched, the nasty little cuckoo chick pushes out the other eggs or hatchlings so his new mummy will take care of him alone. Equally brazen is the hermit crab, which comes into the world with no shell and with no qualms about taking someone else's. But at least he waits until they've finished with it. Incapable of digging its own hole, the sea snake takes over the first one it finds. Well, of course, it's much less bother, isn't it? Much more macabre are the bloodsuckers. That's right, some animals feed only on blood. This little parasite fish latches onto the scales of bigger fish, only letting go once its prey is totally exhausted. But the most diabolical bloodsucker of all is the vampire. Oh yes, they do exist. In the dead of night, these small South American bats come out to feed on victims to satisfy their horrific thirst. I guess there's no need for introductions to the mosquito, the living nightmare of our summer nights, which finds its food by piercing the skin of birds, mammals, and even humans. After squatters and bloodsuckers come the destroyers. Often the sheer number of certain animals looking for food leads to the destruction of everything in their path. Possums are small relatives of the koala that were imported into New Zealand from Australia in the 19th century. They have become so numerous that they're eating the New Zealand forest at an alarming rate. The crown-of-thorns starfish is a real glutton for coral. It's positively devouring Australia's superb Great Barrier Reef, and no one can stop him. A terrifying cloud darkens the African sky, made up of millions of locusts that swarm into farmlands 2 or 3 times a year. They are capable of devastating hundreds of hectares of crops in a matter of hours. If you thought we were through with vandals, you were wrong. After squatters, bloodsuckers, parasites and destroyers, let's take a look at some of the other bad kids in nature's classroom. For you may be surprised to learn that there are even more shocking acts of vandalism. Kidnapping children, for example. Female sea lions with no young of their own often attempt to kidnap pups from other mothers. And who'd want to be in the pup's shoes? Because though the mother usually gets her pup back, it may not always survive the kidnapping. Fishing is a difficult, time-consuming way of making a living, which is why frigate birds have opted for piracy and stealing fish from others. What's more, they do it in full flight. It's a proven technique. You peck, tickle and harass until the fish is dropped. By the way, thanks for lunch. And the poor bird has to start all over again. Like the sea lions, Indian langur monkeys also steal each other's babies. And when the baby starts screaming, the inexperienced mother simply sits on it. The real mother usually ends up being reunited with her youngster as long as it isn't suffocated first. From kidnapping to more food theft, unfortunately, the pillaging of nests is a common event in the wild. Indeed, it's one of the favourite pastimes of certain Antarctic skuas, against which mother penguins have a terrible time defending their eggs. What happens next goes without comment. It's a tragedy. Try as she might, this poor mother fish is unable to keep egg-eating predators at bay. But if you can't beat them, join them. And she too begins to eat her own eggs. Gluttony is one of the 7 deadly sins, but that doesn't stop a bear raiding the first hive it comes across. For honey is his favourite. It's so good. If only there weren't so many pesky bees. Oh, they sting. Well, for once, it's the vandal who really does get his just desserts. Even worse than kidnappers and thieves, some animals are cannibals. Like this fish, which makes no bones about swallowing one of its own kind. And finally, the last of our villains, the male crab, which can force a female to marry him without her consent. A pair of pincers lock onto her shell, and the poor female has no escape from this judo hold.